jackpot. When I walk, I whistle now. Sounds like I have Zamfir, master of the pan flute, in my ass. I tried the low-carb thing. Now, people have gone low-carb hysterical. I understand I eat way too many carbs. Pasta, bread, a big problem for me. And I really have to cut back. But people think in L.A. we're like, they're all skinny. You know, you eat a piece of bread. What? If this stuff were that bad for you, I would have been dead 10 years ago. Trust me. Relax. And I tried the low-carb bread. Have you tried it? It's horrible. I tasted it. I thought the wrapper was still on it. It's not like it went bad. It never went good. I can't believe it's not butter. They should call it This Ain't Bread. Because it looks like bread, but it has no other properties of bread. I said, you know what? I'll butter it. That'll make it better. Butter won't go on it. It slides right off. The butter's like, where are you putting me? Jam and jelly beads up and falls off it. Did they Scotch guard this at the factory? You know what I'll do? It's okay. I'll toast it. I'll make a sandwich. I'll toast it. It's better when you toast it. It doesn't toast. You can't toast it. I'm out in the garage with a blowtorch. It's absorbing the heat like a space shuttle tire. How does this break down in your system if you can't toast it? They're going to dig me up in 5,000 years ago. Oh. He was on that low-carb thing. See that disc? We've seen a lot of these.
Good morning. It's Tuesday, Ayn Rand Tuesday, June the 27th, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity Prayer and the patriotic song of the day, we'll have No Free Lunch, The Rape of the Mind, Donald Trump, Fox News, Vivek Ramaswamy, and Ayn Rand's Part 1 of Chapter 7 of Ayn Rand's book, Philosophy, Who Needs It? All that and more when I get back. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen.
See the glory
Thank you. And now, There's No Free Lunch, 250 Economic Truths by David-Bahnsen.
We have always been concerned that economic education, a real understanding of how a market functions, will first and foremost help the most vulnerable. Obviously, what helps the poor is access to work. But as we looked into the good intentions of so many people, we see that a lot of them just think that solidarity with poor people means giving them things. And from our understanding of how markets function and from our understanding of human beings, you really find that human beings themselves are the producers of their own wealth and of their own way out of poverty. We must show how wealth is created and that the nature of people, even in the middle of their poverty, is to be creative and produce more than they consume. That's what's called wealth, when you produce more than you consume. Father Robert Sirico. An entire book could and should come from the sentiment of what Father Sirico expresses here. The poverty here comes from production, which means the cultivation of the human spirit manifested in skills and productive capacity. When one has the ability to produce, they have the capacity to generate wealth. Centering an economic worldview around consumption is man-focused in the most trite and simplistic of ways. But developing an entire ecosystem of thought and action around production, well, that honors the human person and opens the door to a sustainable, soul-giving eradication of poverty.
And that was There's No Free Lunch by David-Bahnsen. Back in a minute. Thank you. Who is the true conservative? He knows that the government has no rights. He is religious. He is patriotic and uses common sense. He makes judgments, refuses to speculate, speaks clearly and definitively, and is not afraid to say no. He's open-minded, asking why rather than why not. He is consistent, credible, and influential, not ashamed of his existence, unafraid to learn or correct his mistakes. He is a normal American. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, something from Twitter from Vivek Ramaswamy. And it reads, Truth, in all caps, period. Number 1, God is real. 2, there are 2 genders. 3, human flourishing requires fossil fuels. 4, reverse racism is racism. 5, An open border is no border. 6. Parents determine the education of their children. 7. The nuclear family is the greatest form of governance known to mankind. 8. Capitalism lifts people up from poverty. 9. There are 3 branches of the U.S. government, not 4. 10. The U.S. Constitution is the strongest guarantor of freedoms in history. And that was a tweet from Vivek Ramaswamy. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, Fox News.
Breaking, another whistleblower is sounding the alarm in the Hunter Biden tax probe, claiming U.S. Attorney David Weiss was not making decisions and was not really in charge. That validates what we have already heard from Gary Shapley, the whistleblower who has gone public. David Spunt is live at the Justice Department with the latest. David, what do we know about this second whistleblower?
Trace, not much. We just know his name is Mr. X. Of course, it's not his real name, but he wants to be anonymous. He told congressional staff last month he became emotional after seeing the way that this probe was handled from the beginning. Mr. X worked under the more publicized whistleblower Gary Shapley, and a letter released last week, Mr. X says it was clear to him that Trump-appointed U.S. Attorney David Weiss was not running the probe. Quote, he had to follow the normal process. He had to go to Washington, D.C., the U.S. Attorney's office, them saying no. So he really wasn't in charge. He had to follow the process, end quote. But just 3 weeks ago, Trace, Weiss wrote and signed a letter addressed to House Judiciary Chairman Jim Jordan. We obtained a copy. It reads in part, I want to make clear that as the Attorney General has stated, I have been granted ultimate authority over this matter, including responsibility for deciding where, when, and whether to file charges. Now, given the discrepancy between what Weiss allegedly said in the meeting and what he wrote in the letter, House Republicans want to hear from him and others in his office under oath.
We want to talk to David Weiss, the U.S. Attorney. We want to get the answers, and the way you do that is to talk to these attorneys who handled this case.
Attorney General Merrick Garland has denied blocking Weiss from investigating. The story continues on Capitol Hill and in the courts. Trace.
Back to you as the news warrants. David Spunt live for us in D.C. David, thank you. Sandra.
And so that was Fox News. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, the rape of the mind.
The new courage. Philosophy and psychology have made us aware of new challenges and new courage. Socrates, over 2,000 years ago, considered bravery a spiritual courage, which goes far beyond the courage of physical battle. A soldier can be aggressive and have contempt for death without being brave. His rashness can be a suicidal foolhardiness, inspired by a collective elan. This may be the panicky courage of the unaware primitive infant in us. There is also a spiritual bravery, a mental courage that goes beyond the self. It serves an idea. It asks not only what the price of life is, but also for what that price is being asked. It asks for hyperconsciousness of the self as a thinking, spiritual being. It is only comparatively recently that spiritual courage has been esteemed. Socrates' notion has taken a long time to seep into our thinking. It was only after the Reformation that the heroic struggle of the lonely, battling personality gained value. To defend your own dissecting opinion courageously, even against the pressure of a majority opinion, acquired a heroic color, especially where nonconformism and heresy were forbidden. Gandhi's quiet and stubborn campaign of passive resistance is today considered more courageous than the bravery of the soldier who throws himself into the ecstasy of battle. Spiritual bravery is not found among the conformists or among those who preach uniformity or among those who plead for smooth social adjustment. It requires continual mental alertness and spiritual strength to resist the dragging current of conformist thought. Man has to be stronger than the mere will for self-protection and self-assertion. He has to be able to go beyond himself in the service of an idea and has to be able to acknowledge loyally that he has been wrong when higher values are found. Indeed, there is a spiritual courage that goes beyond all automatic reflex action. Man is not only a mass, a piece of kneaded dough, he is also a personality. He dares to confront the human masses as he confronts the entire world, as a thinking human being. Consciousness, alert awareness are themselves a form of courage, a lonely exploration and a confrontation of values. Such courage dares to break through old traditions, taboos, prejudices, and dares to doubt dogma. The heroes of the mind do not know the fanfare, the pathetic show, the pseudo-courage of exaltation and glory. These brave heroes fight their inner battle against rigidity, cowardice, and the wish to surrender conviction for the sake of ease. This courage is like remaining awake when others want to soothe themselves with sleep and oblivion. Totalitarian ideology is able to blackmail man through his inner cowardice. It threatens him into surrendering his innermost convictions in exchange for glamour and acceptance, for hero worship, for honor and acknowledgement. Yet the true hero is true to his ideals. Only when people have learned to accept individual responsibility can the world be helped by the combined efforts of many individuals. Don't imitate the master. Don't merely identify with the leader. But if you do conform, accept his lead with full recognition of your own responsibility. Such heroism of the spirit is only possible if you're the master of your emotions and in full control of your aggressions. The new hero will not be recognized because of his muscles or aggressive power, but because of his character, his wisdom, and his mental proportions. Intimate knowledge of bravery dethrones most of the popular notions about it as an exalted fascination. Psychological knowledge fosters new forms of courage, demanding exhausting labor, the labor of thought rather than the easy work of recklessness. I cannot take any other option than for this enduring courage of life, courage that no longer embodies the magic attraction of suicide and decline. Courage should be the vivid faith in and the alert awareness and the sound consideration of all that moves life. The Nazis were very much aware of the existence of unbendable heroes among their victims, whose faces could not be changed, whose minds could not be coerced. They called their calmness and stubborn will physiognomic insubordination, and they tried to kill these heroes as soon as they were discovered. Happily, the jailers had many blind spots when it came to detecting spiritual greatness. When the war was over, most of these heroes disappeared modestly into the crowd after their mission was fulfilled, leaving leadership to the more sophisticated politicians.
And that was The Rape of the Mind, by Joost-Meerlo, MD. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now about a minute and a half of Donald Trump.
The USA is a mess. Our economy is crashing. Inflation is out of control. China, Russia, Iran, North Korea have formed together as a menacing and destructive coalition. Our currency is crashing and will soon no longer be the world standard. The way it's going, we're going to lose our currency as the world standard, which will be the single greatest defeat for this country in 200 years. That will be catastrophe. It won't happen with me, not even a chance. Just like Russia would never have invaded Ukraine and China would not have even thought about Taiwan, as I said. If you took the 5 worst presidents in the history of the United States and added them up, they would have never done the destruction to our country as crooked Joe Biden and the Biden administration have done. Nobody's done damage to this country like this. Our country is...
Thank you. And now a little bit more Donald Trump from Manchester, New Hampshire.
That's the biggest risk because they cheat like hell. But I promise you this, you put me back in the White House, the reign will be over, and it'll be over quickly, and America will be a free nation once again. When I'm back in the Oval Office, I will totally obliterate the deep state. And there is a deep state. I used to say, I don't know, is there a deep state? It's far more vicious than anybody understands. That's why they do this stuff with me. These fake prosecutors, right? Deranged people. I will appoint a real special prosecutor to it.
And that was former President Donald Trump in New Hampshire. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now more Donald Trump from New Hampshire.
I will work to ban federal employees from taking job at companies that they regulate. These guys, they regulate companies, and all of a sudden you see they're not regulated. They're giving the companies everything, and then they retire. Congratulations, they give them a little watch. They send them on the way, and 2 days later they announce, I happen to be working for, I won't mention names, like Raytheon or this, whatever. But I happen to be working for Big Pharma. I was given a great job. Oh, how much are you getting? Well, they pay me approximately $1.5 million a year. Oh, that sounds good. Great job. No, it's very sad what's going on, but we're not going to let that happen. We're not going to let that happen. You can't go, you regulate companies, you're not going to work for them because even honest ones are influenced, and they're influenced too much. That means no more revolving door between Big Pharma and the FDA. The FDA guys, they go into Big Pharma.
And that was Donald Trump about banning federal employees from serving in the companies and industries that they regulate. Back in a minute. Thank you, and still more. Another minute of Donald Trump.
I will destroy the cartels just as we destroyed the ISIS caliphate. 100% of ISIS. When I came in, they said, you won't be able to do it. I said, yes, I will. And we destroyed it in a very short period of time. We had some great generals. Not all of them are like the television guys, the guys you see on television. They are not the best. I will deploy the U.S. Navy to impose a full naval embargo on cartel trafficking. And you know, New Hampshire in particular, you have a drug problem that's unbelievable because I go to different states and some have, and many have it, but I don't think there's anyone that has more severe drug problems than New Hampshire. So we have to get your governor to get a little bit more active on that because that's a bad thing. That's really hurting.
And that was Donald Trump on the drug cartels. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, one last minute with Donald Trump.
Today I'm proposing another new policy that will help us drain the swamp to stop Biden's wasteful spending and crippling inflation. I will fight to restore the president's historic impoundment power. A lot of you don't know what that is. For 200 years, the president had the right to block unneeded spending and return the funds directly to the Treasury. They stopped that. Congress unconstitutionally probably attacked the impoundment power in 1974, but it will come back. We're going to bring it back, and we will squeeze the bloated federal bureaucracy, and we'll, instead of just having to just spend it, we're going to reduce our debt. We would have reduced our debt with the oil. You know, we were doing so well with oil. We were energy independent. We're going to reduce your taxes further, and we're going to pay down debt. Today, I'm proposing another new policy that will help.
And that was Donald Trump on another policy to drain the swamp, and that is to bring back the president's power of impoundment. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now it'll be the first 15 minutes of Chapter 7 from Ayn Rand's book, Philosophy, Who Needs It? It's an hour-long chapter, so I'm going to divide it up into 4 pieces. And this is the first 15 minutes.
Seven. Faith and Force. The Destroyers of the Modern World, 1960. From a lecture delivered at Yale University on February 17, 1960, at Brooklyn College on April 4, 1960, and at Columbia University on May 5, 1960. If you want me to name, in one sentence, what is wrong with the modern world, I will say that never before has the world been clamoring so desperately for answers to crucial problems, and never before has the world been so frantically committed to the belief that no answers are possible. Observe the peculiar nature of this contradiction, and the peculiar emotional atmosphere of our age. There have been periods in history when men failed to find answers because they evaded the existence of the problems, pretended that nothing threatened them, and denounced anyone who spoke of approaching disaster. This is not the predominant attitude of our age. Today, the voices proclaiming disaster are so fashionable a bromide that people are battered into apathy by their monotonous insistence. But the anxiety under that apathy is real. Consciously or subconsciously, intellectually or emotionally, most people today know that the world is in a terrible state and that it cannot continue on its present course much longer. The existence of the problems is acknowledged, yet we hear nothing but meaningless generalities and shameful evasions from our so-called intellectual leaders. Wherever you look, whether in philosophical publications, or intellectual magazines, or newspaper editorials or political speeches of either party, you find the same mental attitude made of two characteristics: staleness and superficiality. People seem to insist on talking and on carefully saying nothing. The evasiveness, the dullness, the gray conformity of today's intellectual expressions sound like the voices of men under censorship, where no censorship exists. Never before has there been an age characterized by such a grotesque combination of qualities as despair and boredom. You might say that this is the honest exhaustion of men who have done their best in the struggle to find answers and have failed. But the dignity of an honestly helpless resignation is certainly not the emotional atmosphere of our age. An honest resignation would not be served or expressed by repeating the same worn-out bromides over and over again, while going through the motions of a quest. A man who is honestly convinced that he can find no answers would not feel the need to pretend that he is looking for them. You might say that the explanation lies in our modern cynicism, and that people fail to find answers because they really don't care. It is true that people are cynical today, but this is merely a symptom, not a cause. Today's cynicism has a special twist. We are dealing with cynics who do care, and the ugly secret of our age lies in that which they do care about, that which they are seeking. The truth about the intellectual state of the modern world, the characteristic peculiar to the 20th century, which distinguishes it from the other periods of cultural crisis, is the fact that what people are seeking is not the answers to problems, but the reassurance that no answers are possible. A friend of mine once said that today's attitude, paraphrasing the Bible, is, "Forgive me, Father, for I know not what I'm doing, and please don't tell me." Observe how noisily the modern intellectuals are seeking solutions for problems, and how swiftly they blank out the existence of any theory or idea, past or present, that offers the lead to a solution. Observe that these modern relativists, with their credo of intellectual tolerance, of the open mind, of the anti-absolute, turn into howling dogmatists to denounce anyone who claims to possess knowledge. Observe that they tolerate anything except certainty, and approve of anything except values. Observe that they profess to love mankind and drool with sympathy over any literary study of murderers, dipsomaniacs, drug addicts, and psychotics, over any presentation of their loved object's depravity, and scream with anger when anyone dares to claim that man is not depraved. Observe that they profess to be moved by compassion for human suffering, and close their ears indignantly to any suggestion that man does not have to suffer. What you see around you today, among modern intellectuals, is the grotesque spectacle of such attributes as militant uncertainty, crusading cynicism, dogmatic agnosticism, boastful self-abasement, and self-righteous depravity. The two absolutes of today's non-absolutists are that ignorance consists of claiming knowledge, and that immorality consists of pronouncing moral judgments. Now, why would people want to cling to the conviction that doom, darkness, depravity, and ultimate disaster are inevitable? Well, psychologists will tell you that when a man suffers from neurotic anxiety, he seizes upon any rationalization available to explain his fear to himself. And he clings to that rationalization in defiance of logic, reason, reality, or any argument assuring him that the danger can be averted. He does not want it to be averted because the rationalization serves as a screen to hide from himself the real cause of his fear, the cause he does not dare to face. Ladies and gentlemen, what you are seeing today is the neurotic anxiety of an entire culture. People don't want to find any answers to avert their danger. All they want, all they're looking for, is only some excuse to yell, "I couldn't help it." If certain centuries are to be identified by their dominant characteristics, like the age of reason or the age of enlightenment, then ours is the age of guilt. What is it that people dread? And what do they feel guilty of? They dread the unadmitted knowledge that their culture is bankrupt. They feel guilty because they know that they have brought it to bankruptcy and that they lack the courage to make a fresh start. They dread the knowledge that they have reached the dead end of the traditional evasions of the centuries behind them, that the contradictions of Western civilization have caught up with them, that no compromises or middle-of-the-roads will work any longer, and that the responsibility of resolving those contradictions by making a fundamental choice is theirs, now, today. They are temporizing in order to evade the fact that we have to check our basic premises, or pay the price of all unresolved contradictions, which is destruction. The three values which men had held for centuries, and which have now collapsed, are mysticism, collectivism, altruism. Mysticism, as a cultural power, died at the time of the Renaissance. Collectivism, as a political ideal, died in World War II. As to altruism, it has never been alive. It is the poison of death in the blood of Western civilization, and men survived it only to the extent to which they neither believed nor practiced it. But it has caught up with them, and that is the killer which they now have to face and to defeat. That is the basic choice they have to make. If any civilization is to survive, it is the morality of altruism that men have to reject. Some of you will recognize my next sentences. Yes, this is an age of moral crisis. Yes, you are bearing punishment for your evil. Your moral code has reached its climax, the blind alley at the end of its course. And if you wish to go on living, what you now need is not to return to morality, but to discover it. What is morality? It is a code of values to guide man's choices and actions, the choices which determine the purpose and the course of his life. It is a code by means of which he judges what is right or wrong, good or evil. What is the moral code of altruism? The basic principle of altruism is that man has no right to exist for his own sake, that service to others is the only justification of his existence, and that self-sacrifice is the highest moral duty, virtue, and value. Do not confuse altruism with kindness, goodwill, or respect for the rights of others. These are not primaries, but consequences, which, in fact, altruism makes impossible. The irreducible primacy of altruism, the basic absolute, is self-sacrifice, which means self-immolation, self-abnegation, self-denial, self-destruction, which means the self as a standard of evil, the selfless as a standard of the good. Do not hide behind such superficialities as whether you should or should not give a dime to a beggar. That is not the issue. The issue is whether you do or do not have the right to exist without giving him that dime. The issue is whether you must keep buying your life, dime by dime, from any beggar who might choose to approach you. The issue is whether the need of others is the first mortgage on your life and the moral purpose of your existence. The issue is whether man is to be regarded as a sacrificial animal. Any man of self-esteem will answer no. Altruism says yes. Now, there is one word, a single word, which can blast the morality of altruism out of existence and which it cannot withstand. The word, why? Why must man live for the sake of others? Why must he be a sacrificial animal? Why is that the good? There is no earthly reason for it, and ladies and gentlemen, in the whole history of philosophy, no earthly reason has ever been given. It is only mysticism that can permit moralists to get away with it. It was mysticism, the unearthly, the supernatural, the irrational, that has always been called upon to justify it, or, to be exact, to escape the necessity of justification. One does not justify the irrational. One just takes it on faith. What most moralists, and few of their victims, realize is that reason and altruism are incompatible, and this is the basic contradiction of Western civilization: reason versus altruism. This is the conflict that had to explode sooner or later. The real conflict, of course, is reason versus mysticism. But if it weren't for the altruist morality, mysticism would have died when it did die, at the Renaissance, leaving no vampire to haunt Western culture. A vampire is supposed to be a dead creature that comes out of its grave only at night, only in the darkness, and drains the blood of the living. The description applied to altruism is exact. Western civilization was the child and product of reason, via ancient Greece. In all other civilizations, reason has always been the menial servant, the handmaiden of mysticism. You may observe the results. It is only Western culture that has ever been dominated, imperfectly, incompletely, precariously, and at rare intervals, but still dominated by reason. You may observe the results of that. The conflict of reason versus mysticism is the issue of life or death, of freedom or slavery, of progress or stagnant brutality. Or, to put it another way, it is the conflict of consciousness versus unconsciousness. Let us define our terms. What is reason? Reason is the faculty which perceives, identifies, and integrates the material provided by man's senses. Reason integrates man's perceptions by means of forming abstractions or conceptions, thus raising man's knowledge from the perceptual level, which he shares with animals, to the conceptual level, which he alone can reach. The method which reason employs in this process is logic, and logic is the art of non-contradictory identification. What is mysticism? Mysticism is the acceptance of allegations without evidence of proof, either apart from or against the evidence of one's senses and one's reason. Mysticism is the claim to some non-sensory, non-rational, non-definable, non-identifiable means of knowledge.
And that was part 1 of Chapter 7 of Ayn Rand's book, Philosophy, Who Needs It? Back in a minute. Thank you. I'm Ron, your host and the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all of the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. And until next time, be honest, be smart, be beautiful, and remember that the left has no authority, no power, and they can't win.